In this tutorial, we're going to look at making a wheel, something along the lines of this one here. Let's just close that. And we're going to make the wheel out of simple line shapes for starters. So what we've got here is we've got a circle. We've got a line which is going to be lathed to make the wheel hub, and another line which will be lathed to make the wheel rim. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with the wheel hub, and we're going to work with that exactly at 0, 0, 0 on the XYZ axis. So if I take that wheel hub line, I'm going to lathe it, press L for lathe in my modifiers, choose the correct axis, in this case is X. The number of segments, I'm happy with just 16 in this case, and having a look at that in the perspective window, I also need to flip the normals because the visible side is on the inside at the moment. Flip that around, and that's the start of our hub. I can put a symmetry modifier on at this stage. Again, I need to specify which axis, and I need to flip in this case to make the symmetry modifier line up. And because the original line vert was at 0 on the x-axis, and my symmetry mirror is also at 0 on the x-axis, it's matching up nicely. As before, we can go down under the line sub-object and alternate show and hide end result to refine it. And if you have set up the keyboard shortcut for show and hide your result, you can adjust it from there. So we got, there is our hub set up. Okay, I'm just going to make a little adjustment here in my pivot point for a moment, and I'll fix that later on. Okay, so the next thing we want to create is the wheel rim, and I've got a line shape here. Let's just go in and adjust the line a little bit. Again, I'm set it up so that it's starting at 0 on the x-axis, and I can go and take individual verts and position them as I wish. There's my line. So I'm going to use a lathe for the line as well, and if I put on a lathe modifier, L for lathe, choose the correct axis. In this case I want to lathe it on the x-axis, and see what we get here. So this is giving me my lathed wheel. Unlike the hub, I need more subdivisions, so I'm going to type in 64 segments to get a smoother result. Again, I need to flip the normals in this case, and that gets me my wheel hub. I want to duplicate that to the other side, so again I'm going to use a symmetry modifier. Same principle, same process. Symmetry modifier. Again, I'm going to flip the axis, and that gets me my wheel rim. So same technique for both the hub and the rim. Next thing we want to do is put in spokes. So looking at my left view here, I want to put in, let's say I want to put in 16 spokes revolving around the wheel. And quick sums on that, 360 degrees divided by 16 equals 22.5. So at an angle of 22.5 degrees, I want to have an additional spoke. So I'm going to start with creating a line, and I'm going to draw a line from the hub to the center of the wheel rim. In perspective view, I'm going to make an adjustment on that. I'm going to move the first point of the line in to line up with my wheel rim like that. And with that line, we're going to enable in render, enable in viewport, and decide the thickness. I'm going to say 0.5 maybe 0.3 to give myself a, let's go down to 0.15, just a slightly thinner spoke. So this spoke, we want to rotate it around the wheel. And if you're familiar with shifting the pivot point of an object, we do it in the third panel in here in the hierarchy, effect pivot only, and I'm going to zero out the position of the pivot on the X, Y and the Z. And if I switch that off, ordinarily my pivot will pop down there, but in this case I need to click on use working pivot in order to make that happen. That gets my pivot right where I want it. So I want to, as I said, rotate 15 copies to make 16 altogether, and I want to rotate them 22.5 degrees apart. So in my angle snap up here, if I right click on it, under options I can specify the number of degrees apart, and by default that's going to go in increments of 5 degrees. So if I put in 22.5 and with my angle snap on, now carry out a rotation. So let's rotate that spoke, shift to make a rotation, and that creates a 22.5 degree interval between the spokes. Next thing I want to do is put in the number of copies as 15 and go OK, and that gives me 15 spokes. That's all very good. Next thing I can do, in fact I can, is to mirror those across. I'm going to turn off that angle snap, go to my mirror tool, and I'm going to make a mirror of, let's just cancel that for a moment. I need to select all my spokes first of all. So selecting all my spokes, and I'm going to mirror them, choose the axis as the x-axis. I can put in an offset if I wish and go OK. That gets me spokes on the other side as well. I may need to move them to the right position, but for the moment that'll do fine. And also I want to just rotate them so that they're offset, so they're not exactly lined up with the spokes on the other side. So if I rotate this group of spokes to around there, I get just more even intervals. So looking at all of that together, that's my basic wheel. I'm going to select all of those objects, and I've got a metal aluminium kind of looking material made in my materials browser, so I'm just going to assign that material to the selection. And in the next tutorial we'll look at creating a tire to go onto the wheel.